Welcome, guys. This is ELA. We should be in ELA class right now, and this is going to be lesson 15. We're in text structures part 2. Last week we began talking about text structures. We talked about chronology and comparison and contrast and those types of things. And so this week we are going to continue with that idea, but we are going to begin to expand on those ideas a little bit, which is generally how education does. You learn about a concept and then that concept gets expanded on. So it's very important that you lay the foundations well for that to begin with. You can open in your iReady reading books, your ELA reading books, to page 234 and 235. We will cover a bit of that material today, and then we'll actually continue this lesson for tomorrow. But today we will first read the story and, we will read the story eventually. First, let's talk about what we want to do with this section. The I can statements, the things that we want to be able to do by the time we finish this, is that we want to be able to identify and analyze text structures, including chronology and problem solution, particularly in a memoir. Number 2, we also want to be able to explain how the author's choice of text structure affects my understanding of the memoir. So if we're telling a story, for example, not every type of way to organize our thoughts works. If you're sharing ideas, like if you're sharing why you like, to go to Kings Island as opposed to going to Scene 75, or maybe vice versa, maybe you prefer one to the other, you wouldn't really use a chronology for that because you're sharing ideas. There's not a chronology. There's not a sequence or an order of events that things occur in. So, sometimes text structures, they work in one context. Say if you're telling a story about you going to Kings Island, then you could start from the beginning and through the middle and the end, and there's an order to the events that you share. But if you're sharing ideas about why you prefer to do one or the other, well, there's not an order of events. There are no events to share. You're just sharing reasons why you like it. There might be events, like you might use an example to say, I like Kings Island because I like to ride roller coasters, and they don't really have any big roller coasters at Scene 75, and you can tell about a time when maybe you went to do that. But at least for this example, we don't really have maybe a story. So sometimes certain types of text structures and ways of compiling our thoughts or ways of sharing our thoughts, some work better for certain scenarios than others. So in this one, we are going to begin to expand on some of those things, but let's read the story first. Kind of our story here. We are on page 234. It has some close reader habits. How does the structure of the last 2 paragraphs differ from the others? Reread the article. Circle details that help you identify the structure of paragraphs 3 and 4. So 3 and 4 are down here. Let's go ahead and read this together first, and then we will come back to identify some of those things, bearing in mind that problem solving or problem solution is part of the idea. We will identify some of those things, and that will help us as we begin to answer the questions on page 235 and do the writing portions that are on page 236 and 237. All right, paragraph 1, and they've numbered our paragraphs over here. You can see, just to review, typically when you write a paper, I do not want you numbering your paragraphs, but they do this so that it's easy as a text, or easy when, as a class, we're reviewing those things. I can point to things easily, and it makes it easy for you to see where I'm referring to. But normally you wouldn't do that. And you see they've indented the beginning of each paragraph. That is an important reminder or refresher that when we're writing, the beginning of each paragraph should be indented. And they share an idea. This first sentence has 3 or 4 sentences in it, and then they move on to the next portion. So the second paragraph is indented. You want to make sure when you're doing that, you follow that same model in your writing. You indent the first line of the paragraph, and then after that, there's, they're fairly uniform across the side, but the first line of each paragraph is always indented. So this first story that we're reading is under a genre called history articles, and it's fairly recent history. It's by a story by Theresa Baker, and it's 30 Seconds of Fuel. So let's see what this is about. In July 1969, 3 astronauts blasted off for the moon. Their goal was not only to land on the moon, but also to walk on its surface. The journey from Earth to moon was quiet, and the astronauts were patient and calm during the trip. The landing, however, would be quite exciting. Paragraph 2. After getting near the moon, the landing ship named Eagle separated from the command ship. The command ship then remained in orbit around the moon. During the landing ship's descent to the moon, the astronaut flying the ship made an announcement. Astronaut Neil Armstrong said, "The Eagle has wings." He meant that the landing ship was flying well and doing its job. As the Eagle began its final approach, alarms sounded. By now, fuel was running low. Looking out the window, Armstrong realized the terrain was not good for landing. The problem was that it was rocky and dangerous. The landing site was supposed to be smooth. There was last paragraph, paragraph 4, there was less than a minute of fuel left for a landing. If they ran out, the Eagle would be forced to cancel its flight and go back to the command ship. Armstrong had to decide how to meet this challenge. Should he call off the landing, or should he look for another landing spot? He quickly chose to fly the ship to another area. Just seconds later, the ship landed in an area of the moon called the Sea of Tranquility. There were only about 30 seconds of fuel left. Armstrong announced, "The Eagle has landed." All right, very good. So part of what the book wants us to do, and I will be grading you based on this, and your work done in this section, we want to circle details that help us identify the structure of paragraphs 3 and 4. So I am going to help you with that. I want you to note there's some really standout ways that make it easy to identify. So we're looking for things that have a problem and a solution, and or the solution to those problems. So the problem they actually identify for us. So you should identify the problem. That makes it really easy because they have the word here, the problem, in paragraph 3. The third to the last line, the problem was that it was rocky and dangerous. So you can just circle the problem, and maybe you would underline rocky and dangerous. So it makes it really easy to identify what the problem is. We're looking for problem and solutions in our text here, and this is one of those. There's a problem, and the problem is that it's rocky and dangerous. All right, as we go down to paragraph 4, we want to see what the solutions to these problems are. And the first thing, as you read through, you might find some details that kind of help us see what their solution is. And one thing is that he had to decide how to meet this challenge. He had to decide how to meet this challenge. You might underline that. That's not really the solution, but it's showing that he's looking for the solution. All right, so he had to quickly choose. He quickly chose to fly the ship to another area. So that's actually part of the solution, is that he chose to fly the ship to another area, and he says the ship landed, so he had to land the ship. You might circle that. And then maybe the Sea of Tranquility is a good one because that's where he landed at. So those are things that indicate the solution. So I'd like to see you either circle or underline some of those things. I kind of underlined the actual problem, which he says the problem is that it's rocky and dangerous. Some mixture of circling and underlining. And then, he identified some details for you, like he had to decide how to meet this challenge. This is down in paragraph 4. He had to quickly choose. And then he had to land the ship. The ship landed. So that the solution is actually that he landed the ship, but he couldn't land it in the place that he initially wanted to. So that's kind of like a short detail that just kind of hones us into those text structures of how problems and solutions come up and are resolved in the story. So you might see that normally in stories in general. So if it's like a fantasy story or a fairy tale, they have some kind of tension that comes up in the story, and then there's a resolution. So that's a very normal way to record stories. So if we go over here to page 235 now in your book, page 235, there's the think section, and it says use what you learn from reading the history article to respond to the following questions. So this is just kind of some mixture of text structure and comprehension questions. And there's this little guy over here. He has kind of a spiky haircut and glasses. And he says, writers may use different text structures in different paragraphs to make their ideas clear. All right, so just because you use one text structure in a certain paragraph, like we see over here, like he's given a chronology here, it begins at the beginning of the story and tells through the end. But while they're doing that, they actually switch to using a problem solution kind of structure down here. So, you can blend these different types of text structures into a story. Okay, number one, the question has two parts. Answer part A, then answer part B. Part A says, in paragraphs 1 and 2, the author describes events in time order. What structure does the author use to present information in paragraphs 3 and 4? So I've already kind of alluded to this. You might guess that the answer, well, if we read down the answers, the author tells the order in which the events happen during the eagle's attempt to land. So again, we need to look at what the question is